So cellular respiration is the fancy name for the process by which organisms take glucose into their cells, that big burst of energy, and then use their mitochondria and the enzymes inside in order to produce a more useful game tokens worth of energy, ATP, that cells can actually use. Now you might be wondering, what exactly goes on inside this mitochondria that allows the glucose to be turned into ATP? Cellular respiration is a series of many chemical reactions, and they're really complex, and unfortunately we don't have time to learn them all this year, but the basic bits are simple, and those are the bits we need to know. What's going in is glucose, and there's one other important reactant, oxygen. You may have known that all organisms require oxygen, and that's why you're breathing right now, but what you maybe didn't know is that the reason you need it is because your mitochondria need this oxygen as a reactant to run cellular respiration. So they're taking in glucose and oxygen, and with the help of many, many enzymes, they break this down into two products, carbon dioxide and water. You also might know that you breathe out carbon dioxide, and now you know why. It's because it's a waste product of your mitochondria as they run cellular respiration. And then while this breakdown from glucose and O2 into H2O and CO2 occurs, the energy that's stored inside this glucose molecule is taken out and put into a whole bunch of ADPs in order to turn them into ATP, charging up the batteries of the cell and getting cells ready to do work. Now you could spend a lifetime studying cellular respiration, like the guys who published this recent Nature article on this sick enzyme called ATP synthase that participates in this reaction. But the basics that you need to know for now are as follows. First off, you gotta know the equation. C6H12O6 plus 6O2 turns into 6CO2 plus 6H2O. In other words, glucose and oxygen turn into carbon dioxide and water. Sometimes you'll see resources add plus ATP onto the right side here, since ATP is generated thanks to cellular respiration. I'm going to put that in parentheses though, and I won't always include it, because technically the formation of ATP is a parallel reaction. It happens at the same time, but it's not part of the core exchange of materials that happens in cellular respiration. You also need to know that this occurs in the mitochondria, and that it doesn't require high temperatures because it's sped up by enzymes like ATP synthase. So this enzyme is just sick. It's the smallest molecular water wheel known to nature. And basically there's a current of particles that flow through this hole, and the whole thing spins around, and as it does so, it takes ADP and a phosphate group and attaches them to make ATP. So it's an enzyme, and it speeds up that reaction, and it does so by acting like a water wheel. What? It also has a good name. It ends in ASE, showing that it's an enzyme. And what does it do? It synthesizes or makes ATP. So anyway, thanks to enzymes like ATP synthase, cellular respiration can happen in our bodies, and the activation energy that's required for these reactions is lowered, so it can actually take place. And the end result is a boatload of ATP that the cells can use to do work. Sometimes the miracle that is cellular respiration is better understood when comparing it to a more heavy-handed method that nature uses to release energy. For example, setting something on fire. If you wanted to get the energy out of a bunch of trees, you could set it on fire, and that will have the same basic result. You'll start with a bunch of glucose molecules inside the cellulose of the trees, and you'll end up releasing a bunch of carbon dioxide and water as reactants. However, the activation energy is really darn high. You have to heat those reactants up super hot, hot enough until they catch on fire before they end up undergoing the reaction. In contrast, organisms like termites use the use the captured energy in food and use it to perform cellular work, and they're able to do so thanks to enzymes that lower the activation energy, so they only need a little bit of activation energy and don't need to jack the temperature up as much. And they control the release of energy and take energy from this descent and stick it into ATP that they can then use for work. So that's why cellular respiration is so cool. That energy doesn't go to waste the way it does in a fire. it's used by termites to do their little termite work.